First question we'll bring up on our first episode here, Matt, is one, it's kind of got a couple of them on it, but what is the most violent drug illicitly sold currently in Arizona?
Yeah, sure. So you're talking about someone selling black market dope in the state of Arizona, and there's violence that surrounds that activity.
Correct.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would probably think right off the top of their head, they're going to think we're going to say fentanyl or cocaine or something like that.
Or meth.
Methamphetamine, right, yeah, because right? So you did a lot of meth labs and dealt with a lot of what we call tweakers, but people that use a lot of methamphetamine. That's kind of a term we'll use for them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of violence that surrounds that, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
a lot of violence with that.
Yeah, but when it comes to currently in the state of Arizona, people that are buying and selling an illicit drug, meeting together and making that exchange, I think people would probably be surprised that the most violent drug, hands down right now, is marijuana and cannabis.
Wow.
Sold here throughout the state, and probably, I would guess, throughout the rest of the states. If you were to talk to any homicide detective, violent crimes detective, a robbery detective right now and talk about, hey, what violent crimes have you had associated around drug sales specifically?
Yeah.
They're going to tell you marijuana and cannabis.
And that's what I've heard, because I see all these stories about juveniles or young adults being involved in shootings, and they're in parking lots, and someone gets killed or injured real bad or whatever else. And it seems like a lot of them I'm hearing are over marijuana. They're like drug deals that go bad. They show up trying to rip the other one off or something. Is that kind of it? Or
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, there's a whole wide variety of reasons. And I'm not really even talking about, so there's studies out there that show that obviously marijuana these days, when you and I first started investigating marijuana, it was 2% and 4% weed. It was old school.
Yeah.
They'd call it commercial weed at the time.
Cheech Chong weed, right?
Cheech Chong weed, exactly, right? But as it progressed, we started making some of the best weed in the world here in the United States, right? Used to be Canada had some great weed, and Mexico for a long period of time. Matter of fact, a good portion of my career, we were chasing around large quantities of marijuana coming up through the Mexican border, run by those drug trafficking organizations that operate.
And
all sorts of stuff. But as we progress through time, in the United States, we really learned how to make great weed here, growing it indoors. Even some of the outdoor stuff they have in some of the higher elevations are really great stuff. Very potent. So now the potency used to be 4% just for the plant. Now it's at about 30% is the high, a little bit over that actually for some of the high. And then if they want to concentrate it, if they want to pull that THC oil or even the THC trichomes, basically pull the narcotic out of the plant, and they can make it into almost a granular substance. They can get that up to anywhere between 50% for if you don't use a solvent, all the way up to 90-95% if you use a solvent and then you distill it or you purify it. So it's very potent, but that does a couple things. One, it can affect the human in a different way, right? When you consume something like that, if your brain is still growing, if you're under the age, what they suggest, if you're under the age of 24 and you consume a lot of it, it can start to mess with how your brain is developing. And they're starting to see that, specifically in young men, that it seems to be driving for some of them violent tendencies, honestly. But that's not even really what we're talking about here.
Right.
What I'm going to talk about is the sale of the drugs and why it's causing violence, right? So as we said that marijuana is now at 33%, and then cannabis, especially the oil, the distillate, the purified oil, that can be 95%, maybe even a little purer than that. And so that is a product that is worth a lot of money. Now, in the state of Arizona, like many other states, it can be sold legally and possessed in small quantities, and I think they do a reasonably good job of doing that safely, right? So that's not even what we're talking about. What we're going to talk about it a little bit is the illegal or the black market sales of that. And with Arizona specifically, because one of our neighbors is the state of California, we have a bit of an issue. So California is currently producing 10 times the amount of the licensed marijuana they're allowed to manufacture there within the state, right? So
Right.
I think it was, I think I saw the stats for 2024 last. And so California produced 1.7 million pounds of marijuana licensed in the
Right.
state of Arizona to be consumed within the users that are in the state of California. Meanwhile, in the illegal market, people produced another 11.7 million
Wow.
tons of marijuana.
So
that
the
is
black
black
market
market,
is
illegal,
taking
illicit.
off.
Yeah, it's crazy over there in California. And it drives their price down, obviously, right? When you have supply and demand, your price comes down. So it's sold for relatively cheap over there. And they will actually store into warehouses. We know where some of those are, by the way. And allow people to come in, make appointments, purchase large quantities of marijuana, and then take it to across the state lines, right? Drive into Arizona or any of the other states they want to do it to. So we've kind of become a state that's dependent a little bit on our marijuana out of California. So you buy it in California for one price, let's say hypothetically about $800 a pound, maybe less, and then bring it in the state of Arizona and you can up your price to $1,000, $1,200 per pound and make a very quick
Huge profit margin.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's enticing. But what happens then is the next part of that is that's a domestic drug now. When we talk about cannabis and marijuana, the cannabis oil and stuff like that, that is all now we make the best stuff in the world pretty much. We actually ship a lot of this stuff illegally out of the United States to Mexico, to Canada, to the United Kingdom. And it has become something that is very, very popular. So you've got a popular product that you can make a lot of profit on. Next, you don't have to send that money back to whatever organization it came from, which is how it works with drugs that are sponsored by, say, a drug trafficking organization south of the border, the cartels, right? Cartel sends up cocaine from Colombia, from Bolivia, something like that, comes through the Central America, comes up through Mexico. That all costs them money to get up there. And then when it comes to the United States, they still have all the logistics and the people that they have to pay to get it up to land in a source city, such as Metro Phoenix, and then get distributed. So there's a whole bunch of these logistics that goes on with those guys. And so the profit that's made from those initial sales quickly goes back to the cartel so that not only can they keep it as if you're the cartel boss, you want to make money, obviously, you want to have the big house and the cool cars, but you got to pay all your guys. Here, we can send a couple people to California, right? They can come back and it's now domestic money. They don't have to send it back to California. They don't have all the logistics stuff like that. So they have this cash and it accumulates. And then comes the next problem where the vast majority of our marijuana and cannabis is sold through social media.
Correct.
To make your customers, to meet them, to expand on your customer base, you'll advertise on Facebook groups, Instagram, Snapchat. Use Telegram, use some of these other applications, Discord, unfortunately, even, right, which our kids are all on when they're playing video games. And they find their customer base, they advertise they have this product, and then they arrange to meet them anonymously. So you can imagine how that starts to snowball.
Exactly. So the profit margin is kind of the chance to make more money, and instead of giving you my product or selling it to you, I'll just rip you off because you came up with the money.
Yeah, there you go.
So are you seeing these guys, like I said, obviously social media, are they ripping them off like on the first time, or is it one of those kind of games where you make a couple buys and you kind of let your guard down and then, boom, I order a bigger amount or I order more product?
Yeah. So there's a couple different, they're kind of both ways. I'll give you a couple examples, right? So in particularly my task force, so I belong to a drug task force right now that's supported by the sheriff's office, right, and operates all without Maricopa County. And we were chasing around a crew that was operating all throughout Maricopa County, from the far west valley to the far east valley, north and south. And they were selling quite a bit of marijuana and cannabis products. And what they would do between the years of when we were chasing around and we were arresting them, and they would get out and we'd arrest them again, and the group would expand or contract. But between 2020 and 2024, I think we had 18 primary members, and they were selling, hundreds of pounds of high-grade weed. Sometimes we would find them in a high-rise. Sometimes they would rent for the week or for the weekend a house or an apartment or a condo, and they would have kind of these pop-up sales that they would have. So they would go and get their product. They would advertise over Instagram, over Snapchat, Telegram to their group of potential customers. They would show the product, video it, and then they would kind of say, hey, pop-up's going to happen tonight and whatever else. So they would also, one of the things you do when you do social media advertising, when you're trying to promote and advertise, facilitate your sales of narcotics through social media is you want to, like any other good advertiser, you want to show that you're the best advertiser, you're the best dealer out there, right? You're the one that's got the best product. You're the one they should come to. So how do you do that? Not only do you show your product and show the quality of your product, maybe how much you have. So look what I've got. Think of any other ad. But then you start to show all the other auxiliary things which show that you're the best dealer. So you'll show your fancy car. You'll show all the cash you have. And we have pictures and videos of people with, just boatloads of cash, all the neat jewelry you get because you're selling us, because everyone's buying your product.
Right.
Well, that also kind of starts to work against you, because what's that do? That makes you into a target, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you become, hey, look at this guy. He's got some stuff. We can rip him off.
Yeah, 100%. So what happens we see most of the time is that right off the bat on a lot of these, someone will try and entice them to come out to sell it. And do a ripoff. So I'll give you a couple examples here that I have written down. So first, there was my crew that was operating between 20 and 2024. They were associated with 6 different homicides. 2 of them were directly related to their sales. So one was in a very public area outside of a store where they were doing a 2-pound deal. And the person that was going to buy the 2 pounds came and then gave them, I believe it was counterfeit money. That upset the person that was selling it, and he started throwing rounds at him. He caught one person in the head, and over 2 pounds, someone died on that one.
Wow.
On a second one, someone tried to rob people that were coming out of their pop-up, and that turned into gunfire. And so that was outside of an apartment complex in Ahwatukee, South Phoenix, and a person died in that one. On a third one that I know of, they had rented an apartment kind of from a friend for the day and were just setting up their pop-up. One of the neighbors saw the shenanigans that were occurring, came up to confront them, and one of our crew took out a handgun and escalated it, pointing at the neighbor, mind your own business. The neighbor took offense to that, pulled out his own handgun, and shot our guy, so he got wounded. And like I said, we had 6 homicides. I think 4 of the crew ended up getting shot, and a whole bunch of other robberies and stuff that occurred. And that was just one group of dudes.
So you're talking about the crew your group was actually working from 2020 to 2024.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you eventually took them off.
Yeah, the whole
rest of
group is either in jail at this point or on probation,
Okay.
essentially. But
And then do you have some other stuff, other examples that you could bring up?
Yeah, we've certainly investigated a bunch of them. But I think, just as an example, there's a couple recent ones that have happened. So in Mesa, let me see. I've got some notes here. This is out in the far East Valley. I want to say Power Road and Wrecker, where we had an 18-year-old meeting with a 23-year-old. Both of them brought guns over a marijuana and cannabis deal. The 23-year-old ended up getting shot. He had brought a Draco, which is AK-47 style pistol, a short-barreled rifle type of weapon, whereas the 18-year-old brought a handgun and won the gunfight and killed that guy over a couple pounds of weed and whatever else. Another one out of Phoenix PD. Phoenix, that one was down, Union Hills and 21st Avenue. That was kind of up north. Yeah, right. That was a young girl, 21 years old. I'll call her young because I'm not. But 21-year-old girl and her boyfriend had identified a guy that was selling cannabis cartridges online, had offered to buy about $1,600 worth of cannabis cartridges. And she kind of purported that she was just with another girl going to buy it. So the guy said, all right, let's do it. He came with a gun to meet at an intersection, which she had directed. She showed up with her boyfriend. The boyfriend got in the back seat and tried to rob the guy. That turned into a gunfight, and the boyfriend died. What happens then? The girlfriend, who arranged the whole thing, she goes away for murder one,
right?
Because she facilitated that. That happens, regularly. The kid that came over to deal also got shot in that one. I believe he's being prosecuted, but for a lesser crime, because he didn't initiate the robbery. Right? We had another one that happened down South Rozier and I want to say 19th Avenue area, where we had 4 young men. Oldest one being 20 years old, 2 17, 1 16,
Wow.
And they had done the same thing. They got a hold of some guys over social media, a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, to come and just sell some weed, just a couple bags of weed, maybe a couple pounds. And of course, their intent was just to rob them of the weed and then whatever else they could get them. So as the boys drove up where they were going to meet them, right in front of some houses, one of the 4 young men came out and he had a short-barreled rifle and was pointing at him. One of the 2 men that were in the car had a gun themselves. They, for whatever reason, decided they would enter into exchange with them. He managed to hit the guy that had the short-barreled rifle, but the short-barreled rifle hit him in the head. That guy died. He got dropped off at the hospital by his friend, obviously. The 4 men are now being, even though they're juveniles, prosecuted as adults for homicide. And of course, the driver himself is also now in jail for having participated in that deal too. And the story is just again and again. It's kind of the same story over and over again. Selling drugs over social media, having items that are valued at for young people an exceptional amount of money, right? For you and I, $1,600, we're certainly not going to get a gunfight over it. But
Right.
If you're a young man or woman and you're under the age of 30 or something like that, that's a lot of money. And especially when you're advertising openly on that social media that you have all these other things. You're going to show up in a fancy car. You're going to have all this jewelry. You've got all this cash. I mean, I could tell you about stories of home invasions and everything else that goes on, kidnappings, holding people and trying to get them to turn over their stuff. It's really, really getting pretty crazy out there.
Well, and it's because I still have connections, but when I see these stories come out of, these juvies or whatever getting shot in a parking lot, and the media doesn't say anything about it, but you'll talk to somebody involved with the case or from that agency, and it's over vapes or it's over weed. And so the common things are always marijuana, like you said, so it is the violent drug. And social media seems to be the arrangement, the tool, the vessel they use to hook it all up. And then everybody's showing up with guns because they almost know, because they know someone else probably got ripped or someone else got into a gunfight. And so it's almost, you don't leave the house with your weed without your gun almost, right? Or your money in your gun.
Yeah, there's some exceptions. Obviously, not everybody's going to go out armed. But yeah, they know that there is a chance. So you've got 2 groups who either don't know each other, they're just meeting for the first or second time, so they really don't know each other, or they don't have any real connection with each other. Both of them know people are bringing something valuable to that meet.
Right.
So 90% of the 90% of the time, maybe that'll work out. But here's the problem: is that they don't generally bring it to each other's houses. That's not how it works.
Right.
Nowadays, social media, you arrange to meet at a corner. So they're in front of your Safeway or my Thrive Market, or they're in front of the IKEA, or they're in front of the Tempe Town Lake, which they just had a shooting just the other, I think it was last month or something like that, over something similar like
Correct.
that. In all these public places. And then when they start to throw rounds, generally these guys aren't spending a lot of time at the range, right? So when they fire rounds at each other, those bullets aren't going directly at that person. They're going there and there. And then there's all sorts of accessories they're putting on guns these days. Short-barreled rifles, as you know, that's not the most accurate weapon. In close, you can get a lot of rounds off and probably hit your target, but a lot of those are going to go elsewhere.
Yeah. So
where you're in a public area, that becomes very dangerous for the community and the surrounding people and stuff like that. So I'm a guy that's going to deliver marijuana and cannabis. You're a guy I don't know. You're bringing cash. I'm potentially bringing that. A lot of times that's going to work out, but on other times I might want to rob you. You might want to rob me. We both know that, so we're probably carrying guns, and we're not carrying like the old guns. So when you were, what were the classic guns you had when you were investigating narcotics back in the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of revolvers, right?
Yeah, you'd get a lot of wheel guns. You'd get Lorsons. You'd get like these really kind of, cheap weapons that you'd be lucky if you pulled the trigger and it made a bang. I couldn't tell you how many times we recovered guns that you're like, I can't even charge the guy with this thing because it's basically a musket. I can't even understand it. Nowadays, no. Nowadays, it's mostly AR pistols or some type of platform like that, or expensive, really nice handguns. Canics are out there, a lot of Glocks, and then they're adding accessories to these weapons that can turn them potentially into a full auto, a machine gun conversion device, and whatever else. Those are all topics we'll probably need to address.
Yeah, we definitely need to address those, and
yeah.
probably social media too, just for the fact that I'm sure there's parents and everybody else out here wondering, what is this on your phone?
Oh,
whatever,
yeah.
Yeah,
we teach social media classes, right?
Yeah.
As you know, the small class, the short class for social media is a 4-hour class. 8 hours is kind of an intermediate introduction for officers. But if someone wanted to learn how to investigate social media, you're going to need probably a week's worth of class to be able to go to that. That's honestly where you really get the meat and bones. But yeah, we certainly could probably attack parts of those in other episodes if you choose to, with social media and stuff like that. It's probably an important topic we should touch on.
No, but that's a great answer, I think, and I would agree with that it's marijuana is probably the most violent drug right now.
Yeah, I mean,
things can change, as they often do. We've seen it in our time working this stuff, but yeah, it's crazy to see how how violent that stuff has become. So
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to negate the violence that occurs around other drugs. Methamphetamine causes people to do crazy stuff.
Yes.
So does coke, so does fentanyl, etc. And some of these new psilocybin products that are coming out, whatever else, when you're not in your right mind, if you have access to a weapon, things can go poorly.
Yeah.
It's not all the time, and they haven't reached that level yet, but of what we're seeing with marijuana and cannabis. But yeah, I think surprisingly, that is absolutely the number one most violent drug sold, at least in the state of Arizona. I'm guessing you're going to have a bunch of other states that will say the same thing.
Well, I know, talking to my friends in Oklahoma, our brothers and sisters there, that the black market is crazy there with marijuana. Just with the Chinese nationals have taken over all these black market grows, and it's just. I'm curious if the amount of weed, marijuana coming from California is that on the black market, what it is in California or in Oklahoma. I know it's a smaller state, but it's still got to be pretty high or whatever. But
yeah,
it's amazing to see this stuff.
The organized crime in marijuana grows a whole nother topic that we could get into, but we have that here in the state of Arizona. California has a massive problem with different organized crime groups that you might think, but a lot of them there are sponsored by the Mexican-based cartel groups that are actually helping, and it's kind of a money laundering thing. But yeah, Chinese national grows are huge from one end of the United States to the other. But again, that's something that we'd have to spend 15 minutes on.
Oh, you could even do a topic. We could even do a session on the ones doing the grows out in the forest and the environmental impact that they're destroying streams.
And get me started. Guerrilla grows. Yeah, so that's what you're talking about there is basically guerrilla grows, where generally someone will be, like you said, in the national forest areas, the ones we typically will see, but where they take over an entire area, they turn it into a large outdoor grow. They're growing kind of a low or medium level pot, but they're making a huge amount of it. They're generally armed, and it becomes dangerous for people that are visiting those national parks. That's a whole other topic right there.
Well, but even that, they're bringing in, these pesticides and fertilizers that are outlawed in the United States that, have all this stuff and it's leaking into the water system. Anyways, we're getting off topic. But, but I appreciate you sharing those examples for that question there. So that was a good question. I appreciate your knowledge on that. So
yeah,
cool.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Narc Talk. If you got a question that you want us to address, hit us up at podcast@aznoa.org. That's podcast@aznoa.org. We appreciate you guys spending time with us, and we'll see you soon. Until then, stay safe and stay strong.